You know, I lived in the middle of nowhere in central Ontario, Canada, in the bush, 400 acres. I had my own reservation, I like to say. The first time I met Jim, well, I got, I don't know why, but I was, not that I had any position of power, but I said, well, you know, why don't you come out here and tell me the story or something, you know, like, he made it out there. I think he flew to Toronto, and it's about a 3-hour drive out of the airport there, and he came up and stayed for a couple days. We actually walked through the bush, and he told me the story. And he never did have an actual hard copy of the script, as I remember. But that was our first introduction, was just coming out to my little house. Of course, I was married to the screenwriter, Gene Stallworth, who had written Powwow Highway. So it was always, I always liked, you know, that she got to meet Jim, too, because she really respected his work and as a writer. So that was the first time we got together. I think it was from Powwow Highway that he had seen me, which is a little film in '87, I think we shot it. So this is 95 or 94, so yeah. I'm sure I was probably one of the few Indians that ever got a shot to kind of resurrect our history as potentially what really happened. Yeah, when I made Powwow Highway, and I find those two films so related between DeadMan and Powwow Highway, you know, I was doing Guys and Dolls in Montreal when I got the part, because I spent years in the theater and playing Big Julie and hanging out with chorus girls, you know, and I get whisked off to Montana, you know, Wyoming. And within days, you know, I'm exposed to, like, Northern Cheyenne culture. I'm an Eastern Great Lakes Indian, you know, it's a different culture. And I said, look, I got to, in fact, everyone who wrote the film had never been to the reservation. So I took it upon as kind of a real serious situation. So, and the fact that he appreciated the performance from Powwow Highway, I went back to the Northern Cheyenne in Lame Deer, Montana, and I went and fasted with this film in mind. And I went to this reservation, and the locations manager introduced me to this Jimmy Red Cloud, who, he was Filbert, you know, and when I was making DeadMan, I said, I got to go back to Jimmy. And Jimmy put me on this mountain behind his house, and I went up there and I fasted for 3 days. And no food or water. And you know, you keep expecting to see something like, what are you going to see? Is your clan going to come to you? Or, you know, which was a wolf for me. You know, or a bear, you know, somebody's going to come, you know, or something's coming, you know. And I was, you know, you just pray and you learn how to use the pipe, and you using the altar, which is a buffalo skull. You're on a bear, sleeping under a bear blanket, you know, and at night, I'll never forget, Jim would come and sing in the base of the valley. So he would sing to me just, the hardest part is when it gets dark, you know. But around that twilight, Jim would come and sing to me at the base of that mountain. And it was special. Up there for 3 days, and on the third morning, nothing really happened. Except he told me, always stay east, always stay east. And, you know, which is where the sun comes up, you know, which is the great giver of life. And I had to go to the bathroom. And so he said, if you gotta go, just go, you know. And for some reason, I went to the bathroom, but I went and squatted, and I was to the west. And I was sitting there, and it was just, dawn's just breaking. It must have been 4 a.m. or so. In this, I just had this vision, and for me, it was real, of this fluorescent green light. Just float. And when I'm up in the mountains, there's these big trees, you know, the mostly pine-based or cedar. And it just floated just right by me, like maybe 200 yards away, just float right through. and it went right, like it looked like I couldn't see it because it was a curve, but it looked like it went right in, just went right into the mountain. And it was like, so Jimmy came and got me like at 7:30 or something in the morning, and I was like, wow, Jim, what did I see? What did I see? Like I told him what I saw, but he never said nothing. They take you right into the sweat lodge, and you pray, you sing, pray, you feast, you make offerings. I was just so full. And when I came down from the mountain, for some reason, the local crew was squirting, you know how they squirt grass after they dig a ditch or something? They don't want weeds to grow up, so they'll squirt this green stuff, and it's the same, it was the same color of that light that I saw that was obvious. And I said, yeah, that was the color right there, Jim, that was the color. He, again, never said nothing. You're always, in a way, you're left to your own thoughts. You got to figure it out for yourself, And every night, I swear, when we shot DeadMan, there was this sighting. So all the, people look after the equipment at night, and the location, we're in the middle of nowhere, Arizona, and all these people I'd come in the morning and they'd say, Gary, you wouldn't believe what we saw. There was these black things. They were like hoovering over us. And I said, that's a good sign, boys. That's a good thing. It's all good. So that's what kept me on track for that whole film, was there was always kind of extrastellar sightings in the evenings, or, it was this kind of phenomena that happened throughout the shooting of that film. And that was the only thing that kept me on track. Because I started to fall apart, emotionally for some reason, mostly over, death and dying, because I knew I was coming to my death as well, or we all are, obviously. And what came to me was pretty profound, and I was reminded of that the whole time we shot the film. So that's what really was my direction. I had this woman on my res. She was a traditional clan mother, which is the people who select leadership in our community. And, that's an old method of where the women used to control the political leadership by selecting the right people. Imagine if we did that here now. But she told me on her deathbed, Gary, I don't want you to play any more alcoholic Indians, or, stuff like that. And so there was scenes in there where, me and Johnny got pissed and drunk. Would have been natural. And when I look back in retrospect, I should have just kept quiet about it. But I really fought for things like that, like, geez, Jim, this lady told me I shouldn't do this, do we need this scene? I mean, as it was, we were doing the peyote and stuff, but, which is kind of a sacred situation. I learned a lot about that, And so for me, it was a cultural exploration. Stupid white man. William Blake, you go to them. There was a script. I stuck with it. Everybody else didn't, but a lot of my scripted material was there. I didn't improvise too much. Once in a while when I had to, but I thought, I was trying to be loyal to William as well, at the same time, because although Jim took, some artistic license with William's words, just like Neil took stuff from Jim, It was just like that, it was wonderfully creative that way.
What's the best way to get down there?
Be quiet and go.
All right.
I mean, yeah, Jim and I collaborated on the characters, of course, because he's the director and I love him to death. But there was certain things that I really fought for. Like, I always thought the meek inherited the earth, right? So why does nobody die? you know, so that was the classic one, and we fought over that the whole time. And I had some really emotional things, and I kind of learned that, you know, men probably have a harder time with death than women do, you know, because they're so much more based around ego, you know. And so I kind of learned that as we shot this film, and I had to go away, you know, I had to go back home for a bit. And I had some profound things happen to me emotionally just before we went back to shoot the last part of the film, way up in Oregon there. So I put a lot of that into the film, and it was a beautiful thing all around. No, it was shot all over. We started in Phoenix and then moved up to Cottonwood for those beautiful white trees. And then they went to Nevada. And then we went to Southern Oregon for 3 weeks, and then into California, and then back to Oregon. So it moved a lot. All the Nevada shoot was about Machine. And that great scene when Johnny walks down the main street of Machine. Of course, Robert Mitchum was... I saw a lot of his stuff because that interior was shot in Phoenix, and he was like first up. There's some great stories around Robert.
What the hell are you doing in my office?
I remember Johnny had this driver, I forget his name now. I think he was still hanging around with Johnny for a while. And he was an old timer, and I guess Robert asked him for a fifth of something, whiskey or scotch or something. And so he, you know, wonderfully went and got it for him, and he's walking to the set with it. And Robert actually had a guy who stopped him and said, "Where are you going with that?" And he said, "Well, Mr. Mitchum, you know, wanted this. You want to finish this film, don't you?" I was standing right there, and he says, "Yes, of course." And well, you better take that away. Then let him give him that to me, you know. Yeah, Robert had a handler to take care of him, which, you know, this friend I've been hanging out with, who's Jane Russell's daughter, tells me those guys really went at it in their day. You know, they had a Sunday dinner every Sunday, and they just hooted and hollered until they all fell down. Those were the days, you know. With Jim, every morning you get together and you talk about the day's work, and that was great. You know, we'd mostly laugh and hang out. You know, Johnny and I really took our time with each other. We never raced into a relationship, which was good, because we were pretty far apart when we met. You know, but as the film grew on, you know, we started to jam together a bit because he plays guitar. He had this great steel guitar, dobro, and I play a harmonica my whole life. And so we used to jam. And then one of my favorite times is we were way up in Oregon for about 3 weeks shooting the end of the film. I was supposed to go to Washington State, but something about the weather or something kept us in Oregon and Northern California. And Johnny's birthday was, I don't know when it was. It must be in December sometime. He had a birthday. And I decided to throw him a party. And it was near the end of the film, so it was like our closing party. So I rented this big hall or something out at the fairgrounds, like a great big, because we had, you know, back in the day when you had crews, you know, we must have had 70 people plus all the actors. And so I ordered some like fried chicken from a local caterer, and we had a big party, and we had a big jam session and just played all the players from the band, you know, from the film. Everyone played, and I remember Johnny came up and jammed on the drums, and it was a great day, you know. So that was fun. That was my gift, the chicken dinner to the crew, chicken and mashed potatoes or something like that. So, boiled chickens. But that was the extent of our relations, except when we won we're still, I think as far as I know, we're still the only American film ever to win the European Academy Award for Best Foreign Film. And for some reason, Jim couldn't go, so he sent Johnny and I was a little surprised that Johnny came. But we went and accepted the award, and I remember Gandhi gave it to us, the actor. But we hung around Berlin for 3 days, and all we did was go around with Johnny's entourage, looking for the best Wiener Schnitzel in Berlin. That's all we did for 3 days, and we found it in East Berlin. East Berlin is far cooler than West Berlin. And I'll never forget, we went to this little bar at the end, having a drink after our search, and we discovered where the Wiener Schnitzel was. And Johnny come up to me and he says, "Gary, you know, you should be Dr. Gonzo, you know, in Fear and Loathing." And I was like, damn right I should be, you know. And I just perked right up. I thought, yeah, John, let's do that, you know. And so he said, yeah, come and meet Hunter Thompson. We're going to be at the University of Kentucky, Lexington on this day, and I want you to come and meet him. And I said, sure, you know. So I drove all the way from Toronto down to meet Hunter Thompson, and he was just, you know, it was Hunter Thompson Day at the university there, and Hunter was apparently going to give a speech, and I did see his speech. It was about how to blow a propane tank from 25 meters. That was the content of the speech, and I went backstage after, and Hunter was like blowing everybody up with a fire extinguisher. I quickly got out of there and went and hung at the hotel, and I finally got to meet Hunter. You know, so that was an amazing experience. Even that was experience enough. Even, you know, in the end, Benicio got the part. Well, you know, I was born in Shawinigan, Ontario. Neil's born in Omemee, Ontario. And I drive through that town. In fact, Neil just went and did a concert there. But yeah, I was a huge, you know, I can't say that, you know, I love Neil's like we all do, but until you meet the guy, and I went to maybe 30 concerts after we hung out. Like, I'd go backstage at the Wiltern, and you know, Neil's manager became a dear friend, and I'd be sitting backstage, and Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young would walk upstairs, and then I'd go to stage, you know, right, and there's a little guy sitting there, and I'm watching Neil and his solo performance at the Wiltern, and it was like Bob Dylan, you know, like standing on the side watching Neil perform, and then he went back out into the theater, you know. Yeah, I must have watched 30 shows after that. And then Neil's like one of those guys, you know. I said, Neil, because I was trying to start a national radio system in Canada for Native people, because I thought, this is, you know, we had the TV, but I thought the radio was more impactful because it's a more honest medium, you know. And so I was trying to launch this national system of radio. And Neil caught right on to that, and he said, come on, let's do a benefit concert. And so he did one for me in San Francisco there, and we had a great turnout, and he gave me, like, for the effort, $35,000 in like 4 days. I mean, who does that? You know, like, usually you wait months for any kind of benefit. But we put that money to good use, and the system eventually didn't work out, but other Native operations have taken it over, and it's become fruitful. So his contribution made a lot of sense, but Neil's a really special guy. He's a great artist. And I missed that concert when they all piled over to see Neil perform, and when Johnny and Jim went backstage, and that's when Jim asked if Neil would do the soundtrack, and he said, give me a couple of weeks. He's still on tour. But, you know, it was a great thing. It just seemed like it was supposed to be. And it's just a big part of the film, you know, and I just love his guitar. It was brilliant, you know, and Jim tells the best stories about how it came to be, and it's like 1 or 2 takes. It was just You know, he had a real feel for it, and I think he really fell for nobody. I took it as my own life. I mean, I was born on a reservation, but whisked off. I spent the first 2 years of life in Temple, Texas. My father was a Army Corps of Engineers. So I was kind of whisked from my own culture at a young age. You know, I was the Indian in the classroom with Italian immigrants, Polish immigrants, Irish immigrants, and I had to speak on their behalf since I was a child. And so I used all that. That was, in fact, I argued with Jim, let's do this a contemporary. Why we got to go back in history? Let's do it contemporary. We'll save a lot of money. Let's just tell this story in contemporary fashion. And of course, in the end, I fought, why is nobody dying? You know, and the meek are supposed to inherit the earth, Jim. You know, and of course, that's why I'm in the following film, because he said, you know, a couple of years later, he says, Gary, you're right. I'm going to bring nobody back for, you know, for the Forrest Whitaker film. You know, I'm an outsider because I'm a Native American. I've never been inside. I don't think any of us ever have in the history of cinema. We're always on the outside, you know. It's hard being a Native American making American movies, you know. It seemed like I only ever got a film every 7 years. You like a decent film every 7 years, you know. So it was probably the last of those in my era as an actor. I'm not sure saying stupid fucking white man 20 times in the film has helped my career any. You know, because that's why I actually call my band Gary Farmer and the Troublemakers, because I became noted as a troublemaker and had a hard time getting work, you know. Because, you know, I was a troublesome actor anyway, but because there's so much bullshit, right? And then everyone tries to grief you around for money, you know, like they don't. So I always had a hard time with the industry. And Jim always, like, freaked out, like, he was always trying to protect us, you know? He really was. He's one of a kind. But it was a very profound, the whole experience was, you know, I mean, how many films do you have those kinds of experiences? Mostly I get hired, I show up for a couple of days, they give me a little per diem, and out the door I go. But this film, I got a lifetime of experience in 60 short days. Oh, by the way, I went back. And Jim's gone, Jimmy Red Cloud. He's gone now. Went the worst way with diabetes, you know, and where they got to switch your blood out every 2 days. And so I went back to that location because I always wondered, where did that light go? And I didn't have the strength to go there then, but I went back, and it's literally a mountain, and it just coves, like, you know, there's just a mountain cove. So that light went direct into that mountain, like the cove. And it just tells me that a lot of things, you know, it just made sense to me, you know, how the world is really, you know, and that there is, you know, a brighter life or a stronger life outside of our own reality here. And, you know, Native people always believed in the dream world. They always believed in the unknown. They trust the unknown, where American culture doesn't trust the unknown. They got to know everything. They got to predict everything. They got to tell it how it is, but it's not, you know. They don't really know. They don't take the time to know. So there. just putting myself in those positions of like, wow, if I did get, you know, excommunicated from my people because I got too English, you know, that made sense to me, you know, which I felt like that's happened to me too, because I got socialized in an American, and there's a certain part of me that's, you know, I mean, it's up to me to go make my culture my being, and I feel that it is, but, you know, I think the ones that did get colonized got separated from their own way of life. And so you did grow up, you know, he who speaks loud saying nothing, you know. Very poetic, the whole thing. And I put everything I had into it, all that I've learned to that point. I feel like like a good athlete, I left it on the field, you know.